Are you in a relationship that is frustrating? A relationship that's going nowhere? Has the pattern gone on over and over again with different people, but no intimacy, no rich connection? Then stick around. We're going to talk about how to have that by the grace of God today on Living on the Edge.
Welcome to this Friday edition of Living on the Edge with Chip Ingram. Chip is the senior pastor of Venture Christian Church in Los Gatos, California, and is our teacher on this daily international radio broadcast. I'm Dave Drury, and today Chip continues his message, Hollywood's Formula for Lasting, Loving Relationships. As we learned in our last broadcast, there are two basic models for building relationships, Hollywood's way and God's way. Well, today Chip will outline the 4 steps to follow to build an enduring relationship. Just after Chip's message, we'll tell you how you or someone you know can receive a special resource to help build rock-solid relationships. As always, if you have to miss a portion of today's broadcast, you can always hear it online at livingontheedge.org. That's livingontheedge.org. Now with today's talk, here's Chip.
Love is giving the other person in the relationship what they need the most, not necessarily what they even want the most. There's a lot of times in my marriage, there's a lot of times with my kids, there's a lot of times in a great friendship. By the grace of God, I've given people what they need. And when I gave them what they need, they got really mad. And there's people who've given me what I need instead of what I want, and I got really mad. And I got hurt, and I got pouted, and then there was some shame, and I got really upset with God, and I didn't feel fulfilled, and it wasn't Hollywood at all. And I grew up. See, we walk in love. We give people what they need when they least deserve it. Because God gave it to us. Love is sacrificial, other-centered actions that provide what's best for the other person at great personal cost. See, God's way is very, very hard and extremely effective. Let me summarize by going through 4 steps. Hollywood says, find the right person, fall in love, fix all your hope and dreams, and make sure they come through for you. If it doesn't work, repeat this process. Throw them away, find someone new. God says, become the right person. That means become an imitator of God. Well, what's that look like? The word here for imitator is mimic. Mimic God. Mimic His kindness. Mimic His tenderheartedness or compassion. Mimic His forgiveness. So become the right person. That's your focus. Second is walk in love. Don't fall in love, walk in love. That's a very calculated, other-centered, I need grace from God. I'm going to give you what you need, whether you deserve it or not. No manipulation, no games, no power plays. Third, fix your hope on God and seek to please Him through this relationship. People, we've been so hoodwinked and seduced. Can I tell you something? You know what the goal of relationships are? That they please God. And when you go the other route, and want to be fulfilled and self-actualized and have it work out and have people come through for you and da-da-da-da-da, you know what happens? No one can do that. And so then you go find someone else. But when you say, this relationship is about me being Christ to them, and so instead of looking at their holes and their needs and what they ought, need, should to do, I come back and say, God, make me the person you want me to be, and help me to walk in love, giving sacrificially what they need, resourced by you. And I'm going to fix not my hope on that everything's wonderful and we're having deep communication and my wife's more affectionate and everything works out great and we have these deep talks and long walks and everything's super. There's times in your marriage it's not super at all. It's really hard because you have baggage and she has baggage and vice versa. And you miscommunicate. But you know what the goal is? I want this relationship to be pleasing to you. We're willing to endure this pain. I'm willing to go with some needs that don't feel very good as they're unfulfilled. You know what happens when you're there? A lot of growth. A lot of Christ-likeness occurs. And you know what that does? That honors God. And you put 2 years, 5 years, 10 years together like that, and the byproduct is the intimacy. But it's not the goal. Step number 4 is if failure occurs, repeat steps 1, 2, and 3. And by the way, failure will occur, right? If you're married, the person who might fail isn't just your mate. If you're a man, go shave. And who you're looking at is part of the problem. If you're a woman, go put on your makeup. If you say, I feel like there is failure in our marriage, I'm disillusioned, I'm really struggling. Don't say, as in our day we do, well, maybe I've got the wrong person. It starts out unconsciously. And then you get treated a little better in the office or somewhere, and then she looks kind of cute, or this guy is so sensitive, and he seems to understand, not at all like my husband. And so in our time of need, what we do, Hollywood clicks in. We don't even know it has. Now I'm going to look for someone else. All you'll do is wreck 2 homes, screw up a bunch of kids, have all kind of problems, have more baggage than before. No, what you do is you look in the mirror when you're putting on your makeup or when you're shaving and saying, we have a problem in this relationship and I'm not very fulfilled right now. In fact, I'm downright angry, and she is too. And that couch is really hard. Now, am I the man or the woman that you want me to be, Lord Jesus? Am I walking in love? What would you want to do in me, whether my mate changes at all, to imitate you and walk in love, so this relationship could be pleasing to you? See, how much control do you have over working on the person that you're looking at in the mirror? 100%. And so God says, become the right person, make that your focus, walk in love, fix your hope on God, seek to please Him. If failure occurs, and it will, go back to square one. Am I the right person? Am I walking in love? Let's look at the success rate here. The divorce rate among Christians and unbelievers is about the same. You know why? Because the average Christian, genuinely born-again Christian, knows God in a personal way, comes to church now and then, picks up their Bible here and there. When they get a call from the ICU unit, their prayer life really goes up. On little seasons, they read the Bible a little bit more than others. Basically, it's about 10 or 15 hours of TV to every 20 minutes of Scripture. And it's American culture. And in the evangelical church, the average Christian who really does know God is in the faith but lives in the world. And so they go about relationships Hollywood's way. They go about finances Wall Street's ways. They go about parenting whatever will work. In fact, if you get someone to take care of the kids and not mess with it, it's even better. And so it shouldn't surprise us that the divorce rate is about the same between believers and unbelievers. But among those couples who attend church regularly, who pray together regularly, and each have personal time, devotional time with God, the divorce rate is in the low single digits. You know why? Because they're following God's prescription. Do they have struggles? Absolutely, tons of them. But you know what they do? They imitate God to one another. They forgive, they're kind, they look at their heart, they sacrificially put the other person's needs ahead of their own. Oh, what about me? Then God will have to take care of that. And He does. And they do that for a year, then they do it 5, then they do it 10, and they go through great crises and seasons with pressures and kids and finances. And God does a great work, and it's very hard and very good. The reward, the legacy, the blessing is joy and intimacy with your mate, not ooey-gooey electric feelings every day. In fact, some days, not very good. It's a fallen world, and they're married to someone just like you. Children are secure and safe and confident and have an awesome family relationship with all the normal struggles. And then the exciting thing is they see what real relationships are, and they watch yours and they pick up the torch and they marry rightly, relate rightly, and you build a legacy that goes the right direction. You don't have to be a statistic. You don't have to be afraid to make a commitment. There is a way to do relationships. It's supernatural. It's divine. And God will use it in your life. And you can have a legacy. And believers, we got to do it this way. The price tag is too high. It breaks God's heart way too much. And we're doing stuff to ourselves when we do it Hollywood's way that feels a lot like a hammer and a thumb. And we just keep hitting it harder and harder and saying, gosh, this hurts. I wonder why. 2 pictorial summaries here for the models for lasting relationships. Model number 1 is Hollywood's. Model number 2 is God's prescription. Let me give you a picture. This is how God designed relationships to work. If you would, you could put the word God at the top of that triangle, put man on one side, woman on the other side, and put arrows coming together. Intimacy, that's God's dream. It starts with a spiritual base. In an ideal world, even in a fallen world, ideally, here's how to do relationships. The first thing you do, you say to yourself, I think there's someone that God has for me, but I don't think the issue is running and trying to find them and have an ooey-gooey feeling. Step 1, spiritual. I'm going to look for a man or a woman that is sold out to Jesus Christ, loves His Word, has great character. I'm going to look for their commitment, their vision, their values, their lifestyle, and how they live before God. If they're not committed to Christ, I don't want to have anything to do with them. And then you find someone who's really a spiritual person. Then the next step is socially. I'm not going to pair off. I'm not going to go on dates yet. Socially, I want to see how they act. Are they kind? I want to see them with their family. Do they live this out in real life relationships so I can validate the character of this person? Then after that, I'm going to move to the psychological. I want to get to know them personally. And if I'm smart, instead of even pairing off now, I'll probably go out with 2, 3, 4 different people. There's no attachment. There's no, are we a relationship? You get to know them and you talk. And as a brother and a sister, and you learn their heart and their dreams and their gifts and what they really want to do with their life. And then and only then, after you've been to there, and you start a little flicker coming, you say, oh God, I'm always going to keep my emotions behind those 3 things. But then if you start feeling some attraction, you say, wow, what character, what commitment, what love. I see how they live. Boy, I could see this working. And then you say, God, would you move and put something on my heart and their heart? And then you let the emotions kick in. And then if it's mutual, then the physical side is bonding occurs in very specific ways. There's exhaustive studies on it. And you make a commitment physically that you will never do anything physically with one another that doesn't reflect a deeper commitment. So if you're going to hold hands, you say, this is what this means about our relationship. If you kiss someone, you say, this is what this means. And every step up until after you're married, you consummate the marriage, and believe it or not, God doesn't go, oh gosh, this is the part that makes me nervous and I blush. According to Hebrews, God created sex, He calls it holy, and when He sees spiritual union, when He sees character, when He sees vision, values, heart, love, commitment, He sees it all come together. And then the consummation of the marriage, the angels cry, it is holy. And God says, it is good. I created it because the sexual act is a picture of hearts and lives and unity and intimacy instead of some pseudo act for false intimacy where people get used up. And anytime you skip a step, you put a hole in your relationship. If there's not a spiritual base, put a hole in the relationship. Now, if you just heard what I said and you're married, listen very carefully. If you have some holes that you've skipped, if you're not really getting to know one another, friendship happens in that psychological area. In the social side, where you're out with other people, where you appreciate and love, that happens after you're married in periods of service and fun. And if there's not a spiritual component where there's honest dialogue and praying and some time in the Scriptures, gentlemen, let me tell you something. You know that top one that a lot of guys are real excited about, and the average Christian woman is not that excited about? The correlation is, when there's no bottom spiritual, a woman doesn't feel cherished, valued, loved, and like it's flowing out of relationship, she feels used. And when the spiritual is there, it's an amazing thing that happens. Then people start to make love and stop having sex. And God is very pleased. And it will build like glue in the relationship rather than be something to argue about. Now, that's God's way. It's a beautiful thing. Model number 1, however, is the world's way. Let's take that model. Are you ready? Turn it upside down, because that's what the world does. See, God has great plans, and what Satan tries to do is give us the wrong thing at the wrong time, or he tries to give us the right thing in the wrong way. And so here's how most of us, here's how you do relationships. You start with the physical. I'm really attracted. Boy, that skirt really is tight. She's got a good shape. Man, that guy, he's kind of buff and he's kind of funny and I like him. If it's just a physical attraction, then it's, oh, I feel ooey gooey. I just, oh gosh, he's the one, she's the one. You don't know them. You don't know anything about their family. You never observed them. You don't know where they're at spiritually. There's no objective basis, but guess what happens? The electricity happens and it's ooey gooey and it's just like on the movie. It's just like on the romance novel. It's just like on TV. And oh, I feel this. And then that's where your IQ drops. And you get in dysfunctional, lousy, difficult relationships that all your friends are saying, he's not good for you. She is not where you want to go. Because you've had physical bonding at some level, you're emotionally attached, then you go through about 7 or 8, 9, 10 of those relationships. Because it's not based on anything real and of value. So you do the dance. And the dance is, I'm attracted, I have feelings, we go out a few times, we do this, we do that. Ooh, yeah. Do it again, do the dance. And different people do the dance to fill all kind of needs in them. And if it starts working out, then you get to know them psychologically a little bit. And then if you get real serious, you move into the social and you say, gosh, you know, he seems pretty nice to people and he has a good job. He might even make a good father. Or she seems like this and like that. And then finally, at the very end, maybe live together for 2 months, 2 years, whatever. You got to test it out because you don't know anything and, you know, you're afraid to make a commitment. It's the world's way. And then you say, well, you know, something inside wants us to be more permanent. So what do you think? You want to go to Vegas, find a priest or a minister? What do you think? Because there ought to be something holy about this. And that's how the world does it. If you do relationships God's way, it takes time, a lot of effort, dependency, it's difficult, requires supernatural power, and it lasts. And it's rich and it's good. If you do relationships the world's way, you change people like you change underwear. And every time you do, there's scabs that come off your heart. And there's pain inflicted on people. Because anytime you skip the steps, you put holes in the relationship. and the level of intimacy, bonding, communication, all the dreams that God wants for you, they get sidetracked. What should I do with this? First question in terms of evaluation analysis for you is, which triangle most represents your approach to building lasting relationships? Honestly, God's way or Hollywood's? Second, what would you like your present and or future relationship to look like? Model number 1, Hollywood, or model number 2, God's? Third question is, what specific steps do you need to take to begin implementing God's secret to lasting relationships? And did you get in a word, you know what God's secret is? It's love. Love is what makes a lasting relationship. So let me ask you, what area in that triangle is lacking? Let me give you a word. To those uninvolved singles, by uninvolved I mean you're not in a significant relationship right now. Here's my word to you. Don't do the dance. Physically attracted, emotions kick in. Could this be it? Da-da-da-da-da. Do it over. You know what it means? What you're practicing is how to get divorced. That's what you're doing. You're practicing how to start on the wrong foot, get emotionally involved, put your brain somewhere else other than in your head, break up, and then start again. Premise? Got to find the right person. It's a lie. Second, a word to involve singles. You have a relationship, all right? You're in a relationship right now, and maybe it's even pretty serious. I challenge you to go get a cup of coffee, get a Coke, get some time alone, and look at that triangle that is God's way, and honestly talk about where your relationship is and what steps you'd really need to take for it to be healthy. Third is, for those that are divorced or widowed, get whole, get healthy first before you get involved in any relationship. You are so needy, you're so lonely, you're so hurting. Please, 18 to 24 months, don't date, don't. You're saying, oh, but I cry out, my heart cries out. Here's what's going to happen. You are so unhealthy, you will attract the kind of person that about 3 years from now, you'll wake up and you'll look at this person laying in bed next to you and you'll go, ah, what have I done? Finally, for married couples, I'd like you to look at that triangle and in a very loving, gentle way, not as an opportunity to point out something wrong, I'd like you to get a cup of coffee and say, honey, of these kind of 4 areas, or what's one thing I might be able to do that would enhance our relationship? We used to have so much fun. We don't talk. We don't have much of a spiritual element. Could we talk and maybe start real small, but maybe do something like once a week where we get around the table and just read the Bible a little bit and just maybe make one little prayer list? Could we move that direction and just take some baby steps?
Taking relational baby steps. It's how you start down the road to a lifelong, meaningful relationship with someone of the opposite sex. I think it's safe to say that we all want a successful love life, but the truth is we get stuck sometimes. The series, Love, Sex, and Lasting Relationships, will help you get unstuck. In this series featuring Chip Ingram, you'll learn the difference between true love and infatuation. You'll learn what the Bible teaches about sex and making the right choices. You'll find that God's command for sexual purity is not a prohibition of sex, but a prescription for a loving, lasting relationship. You'll be challenged like never before to follow God's plan for relationships. In today's sex-obsessed culture, this series is vital for singles, young adults, parents of teens, and anyone in a relationship, married or single. The series Love, Sex, and Lasting Relationships is available for a special on-air price. For complete pricing and ordering information, please call toll-free 1-888-333-6003 or order online at livingontheedge.org. That's livingontheedge.org for your copy of Love, Sex, and Lasting Relationships from Living on the Edge. Now here's Chip with a special update.
Hi, I'm going to be back in just a minute with some practical application about today's message with regard to Hollywood's formula and God's formula. But before we do, I just want to say that it has been a great summer. You know, we entered the summer in a down economy, and I'd like to say it got a lot better, but it didn't. But even in the midst of that, you know, our June match that went into early July was phenomenal. People gave sacrificially, and it allowed us to make it through the summer, to stay on focus. And I just want to stop and say thank you. I mean, some of you it was a text, and for others it was a check, and others you got online. But I just want to say, literally, hundreds and hundreds of people gave sacrificially, and that is allowing us to do what we're doing. And that is pressing forward to help Christians live like Christians. It's allowing us with this Groups That Give Back program where this small
small group series and others like it are getting translated into Arabic, and we're getting it into small groups in the Middle East. And so I want to thank you very, very much for your generosity. And as you listen to my voice, if you're thinking to yourself, well, I was not one of those people who gave, but I really didn't know that much about y'all, or, I wasn't in a position then, but I am now. Let me encourage you, as we launch into the fall, it would be deeply appreciated for those of you that feel from God, this is a ministry that you want to support. If you would join us by partnering with us financially today, it would make a world of difference. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chip. To send a gift to Living on the Edge, go to livingontheedge.org and simply click on the Donate button on our homepage. If you don't have Internet access, call us toll-free at 1-888-333-6003. That's 1-888-333-6003. Or online at livingontheedge.org. On behalf of Chip and the entire staff here at Living on the Edge, thank you for your generous support of this ministry. Now, here once again is our teacher, Chip Ingram.
If there's ever testimony about the power of truth in people's lives, it's when a picture or a light comes on and people see where they have been and then they see why. When I preached this message, you talk about response. It was exciting in the life of our church, but every time after every service, people would line up. But it always amazed me, the people who lined up. Often they were people that weren't believers. In fact, the triangles that I talked about in this message, the triangle that represents God's model for lasting relationships, and then that upside down triangle that represents the model of the world's way, people out of divorce recovery who began visiting our church came up and said, that's the key. And here's people who've had 1 marriage, 2 marriages, 3 marriages, and they said, that's the way I've always done relationships. I started out with physical attraction. We got physically involved. Then I got emotionally involved. Then my brains went out the window. And then I thought, do I like him or her or not? It wasn't until after all that happened and my thinking was skewed that I ever met his family or saw him in real life situations. And then finally we thought, well, we might as well kind of put a little spiritual twist on this. And we ended up getting married. And now I see why it didn't work. If you were thinking to yourself, that's me. And you know what? As a believer, I have to tell you, I didn't learn how to do relationships God's way until 3 or 4 years into my Christian faith. So there may be many believers today who are thinking, I wish I could have a picture of that equilateral triangle. Okay, are you ready? Even if you can't write it down, in your mind's eye, picture an equilateral triangle. It's a pyramid. And the foundation of the pyramid is, here's where you start in every relationship, spiritually. You want to look at the character and the values of the other person. Before you look at their biceps or before you think she's got pretty hair or a nice figure, you say, I'm going to start with the spiritual dynamic. Is he committed to Christ and lives it out? The next layer up on the pyramid is social. Before you date, don't ask them out. Watch them in group settings so you see how those values get played out. How do they treat people? How do they treat especially their parents? How do they treat people of the opposite sex? Then there's still a green light. You move up to the psychological. You get to know them in a safe way. You ask questions. You find out what they think and why. And you begin to interact at an intellectual level. As God begins to line these things up, then, only then, you keep your emotional involvement behind your leading from God. And as you see a spiritual foundation, you see a life lived out socially, and then you see there's a connection, then you say, Lord, I'm willing to let my emotions get involved, and then God will lead you. In fact, in our next broadcast, this is a real key, because the real question is, where do the emotions kick in? Where does this falling in love dynamic happen? Because it does happen, but it happens at a specific time where it enhances the relationship instead of hurts it. That's what I'm going to talk about next time, and then you'll see how the physical becomes God's expression of something that He created. Hope you'll be with us.
As we wrap up today's broadcast, remember that you can use your cell phone to support Living on the Edge. That's right. When you text the message LOTE to 20222, a $10 donation will be made to the ministry of Living on the Edge. Text the message LOTE to 20222 to donate $10 to Living on the Edge. Standard text messaging rates may apply. Well, join us again on Monday as Chip continues his series, Love, Sex, and Lasting Relationships. Until then, this is Dave Drury saying thanks for listening to today's edition of Living on the Edge.